So we were really excited today to welcome Chimène Dupuis and Amanda DeLola. Chimène and Amanda received a CARLA summer graduate research assistantship to be able to work on the project that they're going to be talking about today. Chimène is a graduate student in my department, in the Department of French and Italian. And Amanda is Associate Professor of Linguistics and Director of the Language Center in the College of Liberal Arts here at the University of Minnesota. And the title of their talk today is Using TikTok and Instagram Reels to Support Learning Development and Cultural Awareness in Beginning French Courses. We invite you to use the chat to back channel and also to add your questions. And I will hand things over to Amanda and Chimène.
Yes, so we're going to talk today about using TikTok and Instagram Reels and how you can do this even as soon as the beginning semester. Before we get started, we really want to thank CARLA in particular, who made this beautiful arrangement possible. Chimène and I really enjoyed working on this project, so we're very excited to talk about it today. We also want to thank them for allowing us to talk about it in the context of their speaker series. And we have two co-sponsoring units we want to thank. I have to thank my team at the CLA Language Center, who helps me and Chimène all the time with the technical aspects of whatever we're trying to do. And then also the Institute of Linguistics, who's co-sponsored the talk today.
Thank you very much.
Our outline for today's presentation, we'll talk a little bit about our project, the conceptualization behind it, its objectives. Then we'll talk about the methods we use to collect the data. So the project itself was to put together an open educational resource which serves as a searchable database for dynamic short-form interactive video. But it turns out it's not as easy as just looking for TikToks and Instagram. You have to kind of engage with the platforms based on the algorithms that they use to make sense of who you are as a user. So we'll talk a little bit about how we sort of hacked that system to get the information we were looking for. Then we'll obviously show you the database we made and the website we created to support it. We'll share that with you, and so you can interact with it freely. And then at the end, we'll leave off with where we are right now in terms of how we're going to test and assess the efficacy of TikToks in achieving the different objectives that we set out for the project. So introduction to the project, I kind of laugh at this phase because people usually have big feelings about social media and they have even bigger feelings about TikTok. But if you aren't familiar with TikTok, what it is a popular social media platform. It is focused on what we call dynamic short form interactive video. So in particular, it's moving images that are sort of the bread and butter of TikTok. If you're familiar with other platforms like Twitter, that's a text-based social media platform. If you're familiar with Instagram, like OG Instagram, original Instagram, the focus there was on still images and filtering those images. Now, obviously, it's moved into dynamic video in response to TikTok, but TikTok's original reason of existing was to create this interactivity around video. With that in mind, what users can do is search for videos, they can watch videos, they can interact with them by sharing them with their friends offline, sharing them with their friends online, they can like them, react to them, they can comment on them, but they can also do some really unique things that make TikTok special. And this is because TikTok itself is a video editing app. And so if you've ever created any content in TikTok, you know that you can record and edit, overlay, voiceover, do all the things directly in the application itself. And so what that means is that you get a different kind of interaction that's made possible because TikTok supports this kind of editing, if you will. And so two main things that TikTok offers that you don't see in other platforms like Instagram, who are trying to sort of match, is this ability to stitch and duet. So stitching and duetting are really similar. Stitching is basically taking somebody else's TikTok, somebody else's video, and putting it in the context of your longer TikTok. So you might introduce it, and then all of a sudden you're showing you've stitched in someone else's TikTok, and then you end on your own note. Duetting is similar, except for if you look at the image on the screen, we've got an example here. What you have is an original TikTok, usually on the right, and then you have somebody running parallel, usually reacting to or talking back to the original source. So basically, you've got two things running at the same time. If you're familiar with the React videos from YouTube, this is one way that TikTok supports this kind of interaction. And of course, users can lurk. I haven't seen numbers, but I think probably, at least in my demographic, the majority of TikTokers are lurkers. So we're consumers of media, but we're not huge content creators. But you can also produce your own content within the platform using the different technical aspects that I described, or external to it, and then you can upload it and sort of manipulate it in the platform however you want it to be. What's really cool from a genre standpoint is that TikTok has a lot of different kinds of content available. And so there's a bunch of different kinds of TikToks that people are familiar with watching. If you're a TikTok lurker or consumer, or even a content producer, you'll be familiar with the GRWMs, the get ready with me. So it's people getting ready to go to a party, they get ready to go to school, they get ready to go to work, and they kind of document each aspect of that. OOTDs are outfits of the day. So they're usually these combinations that people put together. Vlogs are video blogs. So they're usually video journals, people documenting what they did in a day, what they've eaten in a day, things like that. POV is usually a very context-specific situation. So you're in a very situation, and then you see this sort of video of the person who's receiving the action. There's hauls, which are a subgenre that's my favorite. So hauling is like a collection of things that you've purchased for a reason. So a summer camp haul or a grocery haul. Fall clothes hauls are really popular right now. And then, of course, the trend challenges, which I think is how TikTok got a lot of its reputation, people pouring water on each other and dancing in the street. That was one way that TikTok came to be known. What's interesting is that now that a lot of people are in TikTok, and that this was a really common place for people to go, particularly during the pandemic, we're starting to see the emergence of full-blown news sources. So you start to see television channels and sort of more professionally made kinds of TikToks showing up, because people know that that's where people are consuming media. And so this is something Chimène will talk to you about. In our own experience, we ran up to a lot of TikToks with really high production values, which is kind of counter TikTok innately, because the idea is that it's made by people, sort of for people, and it's meant to be this intimate portrait, if you will, of some aspect of their life. But we have noticed that there are tons of we'll say professionally made TikToks out there, which kind of look like news spots or things that you would find on YouTube or maybe on like traditional television channels, something like that. TikTok is searchable just like Instagram and Twitter, and I guess now Facebook by extension. And by that, I mean via hashtags. And that's actually something that takes in that TikTok uses to know who you are. So the hashtags you put in are telling it something about you in the same way that it's helping you find information that you're interested in. And so what we get are these sub-talks, as we call them, and it's a productive structure. So you can actually take any kind of area, any theme, and make a talk out of it. And I challenge you to find a talk that isn't represented somewhere on TikTok. Most popular ones are things like clean talk, if you're really into like cleaning videos, food talk if you're a foodie, French talk if you want to learn a language, dog talk, book talk. You see where these are going. And so there's really something for everyone, and people find a way to categorize and index their interests through this productive use of hashtagging as an index system, but then also to signal to users other kinds of sub-communities that can form based on the themes of what you're posting about. As language instructors, so if we take our hats off as TikTokers and we think of ourselves in terms of helping people learn language, this is really exciting, because what all of this represents is basically the kind of authentic data we've wanted all along, but we've had to, up until now, film or find people to create, and it's always been a little stilted, or it's always not been very representative of a wide variety of intersectionalities. And so this is really wonderful, because all the work is done for us. We just have to curate it a little, do some creative culling to put together the right collection of TikToks that can reinforce the kinds of topics that we talk about in our language classes. So in particular, we're going to talk about how we're hoping and how we have designed our database to help instructors really choose TikToks that will help students gain cultural awareness, gain sociolinguistic awareness in terms of different accents represented in the French-speaking world, make pronunciation gains themselves by being exposed to authentic language, in particular, authentic vernacular language. So language as it's used to be spoken and not necessarily in its stilted written form, but then also the development of communicative skills and their levels of engagement. So our objectives for this project, they were sort of twofold. On one hand, what we wanted to do was, I guess, capitalize or really take advantage of the fact that TikTok represents this treasure trove of authentic resources that can be really useful in this kind of setting for students learning a language. In particular, the language that's often used on TikTok, I would say almost exclusively used on TikTok, is the spoken vernacular. And so it's a kind of language that students don't traditionally get a lot of exposure to in conventionally made published materials. And so we really wanted to sort of imagine all of the different possibilities for this kind of really rich data. On the other hand, so with our teacher hats on, we recognize that people might be aware of a platform, but they might not necessarily want to engage with it enough to have to get to the really exciting part of it. And so I think Chimène and I, as users of TikTok anyway, outside of our lives as teachers, what we thought we could do is connect French instructors to this new platform by seeing or curating, if you will, all the best parts of it that would have these educational benefits. What we're hoping and what we're going to try to test with our research coming up is to see if it will increase learners' motivation, if it will increase their interest in learning French language and learning about different representations of Francophone culture. In particular, we really want to match both the expectations and the needs of younger generations who interface with these kinds of platforms in almost every aspect of their lives. But we also want to capitalize off of the fact that they know these platforms very well. And so even if they don't speak a single word of the language they're trying to learn, because they understand the platform and they understand the kinds of interactions that take place there, they can use that sort of knowledge of the genre to really support their ability to focus on form and to focus on cultural awareness. So we really are trying to kind of hone in on things we know that they're used to using and enjoy using, but then also capitalize off of that by asking them to use it in different ways. So Chimène now is going to talk a little bit about the way that we collected data. If you've used TikTok, you're familiar with the FYP, the For You page, which is the equivalent of the wall in your wall in Facebook or your wall in Instagram. And she'll talk a little bit about how we tried to hack it. I say hack because we don't exactly know how the algorithm works for how they present TikToks to you, because it's a very passive system. But we were trying to get them to present to us a variety of resources. And so we had to dupe the algorithm to thinking we were many different people. Chimène, take it away.
Thank you. So yeah, we start looking by information about the different algorithm and understand a little bit more about their mechanism. Although we also use Instagram, today I'm going to focus on TikTok algorithm because this is the main part of the project. And the TikTok algorithm uses content-based interactions. So it has three main criteria to give a video recommendation to users on their For You page. So video engagement, posting time, and adding and stacking hashtags. So although we did not post videos with the different profiles that we created, we still focused on the time we spent on the app and on the different profiles, and to respect the two other criteria to inform the TikTok algorithm, which are like, comment. The first we used when created a new profile was to create a list of different interests. And so we will create a list of topics and hashtags related to the profile's interest. And we will then explore those hashtags, looking for other related hashtags and accounts that were used, addressed, or referenced, referencing to this topic. And this was particularly helpful to search for specific topics and inform the algorithm on what interest the profiles had. So on the other end, the For You page concept was also the other tool that we used to gather more data. And after informing the algorithm with the main interests and using the hashtags, we will hang out on the For You page and interact with content that the user will enjoy. And since TikTok works by suggesting batches of video to understand what kind of content, so they will send you like 10 videos of dancing, and if you don't interact with them, they will stop. But if you really like cooking and you're like watching the video, liking it, commenting it, they will give you more of that. So the artificial intelligence of their algorithm continue to suggest videos that offer you the same kind of content. And since the algorithm is constantly looking for content that pleases user, we only watched, like, and save videos related to the main interest of each profiles. We created 8 different profiles that enabled us to collect a large amount of data and explore a variety of topics. We also used a VPN to set our location in different parts of the world. So the TikTok algorithm will show us videos that were made by speakers in other locations of the world. We were really interested in bringing more representation of the diversity within the Francophone world. So the use of VPN was part of this wish of bringing more representation. And then the different profiles, to create them, we first set the French as the main language, and we only interacted with content in French and avoiding as much as possible content created purposefully for language learning to focus on authenticity. And since we decided to create a qualitative selection of content and offer a variety of resources, we set a different characteristic for our profiles, so different genders, different age groups, different locations. And then we also made a list of their different focus interests, so cooking, cinema, societal issue, movies, so pretty much anything, and try to give them a specific location in the world. To have a better cultural diversity. So I'm going to show you a list of the profiles that we created. We made this list to keep a track of who we were, which account we were using and what we needed to focus. So if you're on the For You page and I'm with Jamie in Paris, I will look at videos that are Get Ready With Me. If I'm with Gaspard, he's a little bit on the older side, and he's more interested in brocante, which are garage sales, some TV show, but also more regional identity of France, like Brittany or like Alsace. So we have the name of the profile, the platform we hang out on with their profile, their name, their age, their gender, their location, interest, and some hashtags that we use at the beginning to inform the algorithm. And I'm just gonna focus a little bit more on one example, which is Jamie in Paris. So she's a young woman who has 17 years old, and she's from the Gen Z. We put our VPN in the West African region, so in different countries, to open a little bit the content that we could access to. So we put it in Ivory Coast, Cameroon, Senegal, and we set her focus interest as African food, short form news like Hugo Décrypte, Afro culture, fashion and beauty. So also like beauty tricks from Mali, like traditional way of making like soap. And on the other side, as she's from the Gen Z, she could be influenced by the image of Paris, so looking for addresses in Paris, looking for fashion in Paris. So this was a little bit what we had in mind to create profiles. And with all of the profiles that we created, we were able to gather over 300 videos from TikTok and Instagram. And now that we gave you a little bit more we gave you an introduction of the methods and the profiles that we created. I'm going to show you the OER that we created. So here you have a QR code to access the website that we made, or you can use the link, which is z.umn.edu/on apprend avec TikTok. And I will give you a little bit of a tour. So when you get on the homepage, you can scroll down and you will have a little bit of an introduction to the mission of the project. And if you scroll at the very bottom of the page, you can see all the tools we created. So mainly the database, guidelines on how to use the database, and some form for feedback and contributions. I will take you to the database. And the database, as I said, gather over 300 a qualitative selection of over 300 TikTok video. And the database is organized under different tabs from topics that are covered during beginning French courses. So such as food, fashion and cosmetic, family, hobbies, environment, or like professional life, student life. And we try to make this database as easy to navigate as possible. So we organize it under the main categories. We gave a little bit more information about the profile that posted it, the topic that they're talking about, which region the speaker is from, or about which region the video is. We also added some information about the language features to help instructors find videos that will be more adapted to their students' level. And we thought it was important to give the link to the video directly on the platform. But as there are different regions in the world that don't authorize people to go on the TikTok platform, we downloaded some of them when the person enabled this option. So we have a couple of videos that are available on the drive, and that we put it the link, and it will directly take you to the drive, and you can still use some features of the video, such as increasing or lowering the speed of the video. And one last feature of the database is an access to some video description and activities to give a little bit more guidance to instructor that maybe wouldn't feel as confident to use another kind of a text for their learners. So really, this kind of videos can be used as homework, as listening comprehension in class, but also if you're talking about a topic in class, or like with a student, you can also direct them to this kind of TikTok that will give them a little bit more information about the topic. Or you can do a lot of things with those TikTok, but we try to give you a little bit more guidance to some activities when we had IDs. We also give comments about if there is any trigger warning in the video, or like idea of activities that we hadn't the time to develop. And yeah, there's a possibility to filter every column of the database. So if you're looking for a specific category, for example, if you're looking for something about grocery shopping, or if you're looking for something about specific recipe or a specific region of the world, there's a possibility to filter all of that. And the guidelines that we created can help you navigate it a little bit more easily as well, on how to use the downloaded version of the video, or how to filter some columns. So this is what our project was, and this is an open educational resources. So it's a work in progress that is really meant to be evolving with contribution of other instructors. and we are very happy to present this this project to you. We really hope this will be helpful for you as instructor or as language learners to see a little bit more authentic videos of with a better cultural diversity. So we are open to contribution and feedback on our database to make it as accessible as possible and as interesting and entertaining as possible. So I will let Amanda talk a little bit more about the forms that we created for feedback and contribution.
Thanks, Chimène. So yes, this is an OER, an open educational resource. And if you work in OERs, you know that it's like creating a labor of love and then sending it out into the void, because you don't often hear back about what people are doing with it. So what we were trying to do by linking these two forms, there's a feedback form and a contribution form, and we'll walk you through them both, is that we really, on the feedback form, we're really interested in knowing how you use it, in what ways you use it, and in what ways we could better support you in using it. We're trying to sort of bridge the gap of not everybody who teaches French needs to be a TikTok expert or spend a bunch of time playing with the algorithm to get useful information that they can use. But there's also sort of a presentational side of how we ourselves curate that, what we market for. So you see, we've chosen a lot of linguistic variables. That's not by mistake. Some of us work in sociolinguistics. Some of us are very interested in representing a variety of accents across the Francophone world. But then we also have these thematic approaches, which I think apply more generally. So we're curious to know, how do you use this resource? And when you use it, are there any snags that you encounter? Are there any ways in which we could make it even better? So Chimène, could you show the, I guess we'll start with the feedback form. So the feedback form is linked on our website. There it is. And we're showing you the back end so that we don't actually have to answer it to go through it. But what it does is it asks a little bit of background information about you as a user. We're interested in knowing where you are, what kind of French you're teaching in terms of level or in terms of learning community, how big your group is, what the modality of your class is. Are you doing it mostly online? Is it asynchronous and people are moving about independently, or is it really structured? And then there's some other questions about how you're actually using the database. How did you discover it? What are the contexts that you're using it in? Are you taking a clip here and there? Are you building this into a larger curriculum? Again, Chimène and I have, I think, imagined this as like a plug and play kind of resource. So we assume everybody's got some kind of text they're using or some kind of direction of their curriculum, and that they might just really need something interesting from a certain place or on a certain topic or with a certain kind of representation that they don't currently have. So we imagine people are coming probably with fairly specific directives, at least initially, trying to see if they can find anything that corresponds to that. And then maybe as they're hunting for whatever they're after originally, they can see that there are other resources that they could work into their curricula in other ways. In the feedback form, we asked you which TikToks that you used. And of course, a lot of these are optional questions, so you don't have to answer all of them. But we want to know a little bit about like quantity. Is this a thing you use as like an icebreaker? Is this a thing you use as people leave? And what we're really interested in, because this is in sort of the the folklore of OER, is do you develop any materials to go along with these activities that you'd like to share back with us? And by that, I mean, Chimène showed you in the database, there was that column with additional activities. You'll notice that we had some activities that we've sort of done as a suggestion or sort of to show you how we might use these, since we use these often in these settings. But we wanted to sort of leave it open to, people are going to do different things. They have different personalities in the classroom. Their classes have different focuses. And we're really interested, if you happen upon something that seems to be successful with your learning group and you might consider contributing back to the open educational practice, that you would share it with us. And so if that's the case, you could share it. And what we would do then is sort of vet it to make sure that it goes well with whatever TikTok it is you paired it with. And then we could link to it directly in the database in the same way that we've linked to our own resources. Again, these are basically just invitations to participate. What we're hoping to encourage is instructors sort of lifting up other instructors, but also instructors showing to their students that participation in these open educational practices is part of the learning process. And so you could easily imagine asking advanced students or students like in a methods situation, learning how to teach or learning how to find certain kinds of materials to contribute to this process. And that can sort of feed the cycle of us helping each other find materials that are useful for our classes. At the end, we ask you some kind of like wishy-washy questions like, okay, we obviously crafted this and it's a huge reflection of who Chimène and I are and what our interests are, but we're actually pretty similar. And so we recognize that there are a lot of people out there who might have wanted to see other things. And if that's the case, that's really a blind spot on our behalf as researchers, but we're interested in addressing that. So this is an OER. We haven't turned it into a website and then sent it off to die. It's not going to fossilize. We are sort of maintaining it as we go. And so if there are ways in which we can add an additional column here and there that would make something more easy for a certain group, or add an additional category for some other reason, these are things that we want to take into consideration. Then we ask you some sort of rating questions about your perceptions, about what you think it did well. Did it help you in terms of how you represent cultural diversity? Did it help you in terms of how you represent sociolinguistic diversity? Were your students engaged? Did this help them to understand the Francophone world in a different way, in a more comprehensive way? It sort of invites you to give any or all of the kind of feedback that you might have after using this kind of tool. And then, yeah, we ask some questions about navigation and accessibility. And those are more sort of logistic. Were you able to filter? Did you have issues using X, Y, and Z, et cetera? I wanted to revisit Chimène's comment about how we had opted to link directly to the TikToks, but then also have them available offline. So we have some colleagues working in states where TikTok is blocked as a website when they're on their campuses or in their schools. But we also recognize that there are situations in which you might want to show something, but you might not have access or reliable access to the internet. So if you're teaching sort of outdoors or in an unconventional space, if you don't want to worry about having TikTok open in front of all of your students, or you get suggested TikToks like you often do on YouTube, this is a way to really focus in on the particular video, and the only thing in the frame is the actual video. This might also be helpful for like assessments or projects in class if you want to sort of keep students on task rather than in the platform where they could freely roam around. Our contribution form is something similar, but looks a little shorter. And what it is it basically says, so we've given you like a starter pack here for how to do TikTok if you teach French. But we recognize that we haven't covered all the topics. We've sort of themed this around what goes on here in the first and second year sequences. And so basically we recognize there are lots of other things, niche things that you would put in a content class or that you would put in a higher level language class or methods class that maybe aren't represented here. There's so much out there. And so we're curious to know if you already do this, or if you get into this and you find some super resource that you think the rest of the community would really benefit from knowing, what this does is basically asks you to share the link. It could be an Instagram reel. It could be something that's actually has on TikTok. And it just asks you to sort of give the title and then give the link and then to suggest some keywords so that we might position it in one of the categories we currently have or create a new one for it. This again is a sort of a rolling thing. And we encourage people to participate back in the OER in ways that are meaningful for them. But I really want to stress the idea that OERs are wonderful, but they really only become more wonderful if people participate in them. So we're really hoping that we can facilitate this kind of participation for you so that this is something that isn't too arduous a task.
And on the website, you can find the forms on this specific page, feedback and contribution. So they're relatively short, especially for the contribution form, and feedback shouldn't take you too long to as well.
And then I'll just kind of end up here with where we are. So Chimène and I worked on this project over the summer, and we launched our database at the very end of summer. And so it's been out there. We've been sharing it locally with the Department of French and Italian here at Minnesota, with our peers. We've shared it with the teachers who are doing college in the schools in the area. It has been linked on CARLA's website. And we've sort of shared it locally. I think we have plans to share it with the French teachers in the US group on Facebook. And it's also currently being used. Another side project that I'm involved in is the development of a second year open educational resource for French. And it's currently being used a lot for activities in this material, which is called On y go plus. Chimène and I, in like a week, will start collecting data on this. And so we're going to do some ongoing research, and we're going to revisit these objectives that we used to sort of set up the project. And what we want to do is bring learners in at different levels into a space and have them work through a very structured, very scaffolded sequence of activities that involve a TikTok that's relevant to whatever developmental stage they're at. And what we want to test is basically, how does their use of this kind of media in particular, again, the meaningful features being short form, interactive, dynamic media, so video. We want to see how that affects their engagement levels, their communicative and interpretive skills. So like, what kinds of sense do they make out of things with all this context? What's really cool about this kind of activity is you can like kind of cherry pick particular words that you know they're not going to know, but you can give them the timestamp of where they occur, and you can ask them to look at that from like 2 seconds before and 2 seconds after, and see if they can harvest enough from the visual, the audio, the emojis, the captions, all of the things that are happening in these videos, to try to figure out what the person is talking about. Like, what could this word possibly mean? So there's some really cool interpretive activities that can be done. I'm a sociolinguist, so I'm really fascinated at how we can use this kind of media in an authentic way to raise people's awareness to not just cultural differences, but differences in the way that we all participate in using some kind of French. A little further along, we're going to look at pronunciation gains. For now, we have sort of a short mirroring exercise to see if students are able, or are there any differences in the way that students pronounce certain things from the beginning of a task to the end of a task. But longer term, as they move through the sequence, we're interested in seeing if they are, we'll say, inspired or influenced in a positive way by all of this really culturally authentic, rich digital vernacular that they're getting in this particular environment. So that's it from us. That's all we have. We would love your questions. We encourage you to reach out to us at our emails, which are here on the slides. Also using the forms that are on the OER. We have an email that's set up directly for the resource, and we'd be happy to take your questions now.
Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks to both of you. This is such an exciting project. There's been all kinds of positive chat in the chat about your project. So there aren't any questions that have come in yet, but as putting on my CARLA director hat, I'm just wondering about possibilities for expanding the project to include more activities, more pedagogical activities, and more languages. Have you thought about that?
Currently, I'm working for the 1002 level, so I'm trying to create lessons for my students at this level. So they have responded pretty positively to this, but hopefully moving forward and having contribution from other instructors, we can create more activities and more guidance for instructors too.
And I'm using this currently, I'm to develop that other OER. And so we're sort of in the second year there. So we're able to do more complex things with it. So that for French anyway, I think that's relevant. For other languages, I think that'd be really exciting. French isn't, so I love other languages as much as I love this one. And French isn't even one of the most represented languages on TikTok. So there's so much more to be done with other languages. I think that's a great idea.
Well, so related to that, Lena asked a question, what tips do you have for instructors of other languages who are interested in incorporating TikToks but don't have the resources to take on such a big task?
Well, we tried to, so the For You page, the FYP algorithm is still very much a black box effect. So we know how to make it do what we want it to do, but we don't know exactly what it's doing. So we're kind of being a little paranoid and telling it all the things we think it might be doing, and we're able to get what we want. The cool thing with the different intersectionalities we created was that none of them collapsed onto each other. So we were able to trick this algorithm into thinking we were actually these 8 different people the whole summer, and none of the material started to be the same that was suggested. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what level of resources you have for doing this. I think that there are some fairly common ways to do it without having to interface. So if you're familiar with the cite command on Google, I'm typing in the chat. You can basically do a really targeted search without ever going into TikTok. You search basically the content of TikTok from Google. And so what you do is you enter this, but then in the same field, you enter whatever your search terms are in quotes. So for instance, I might, if I wanted to do, Lena, what language do you teach? So if you wanted to look
Italian.
Italian, okay, so I don't know what you would want to search for, but you could do something like I don't know, I'm gonna put rigatoni because it's lunchtime, or like festa or whatever. And so what you can basically do is this, and it allows you external to the platform. You don't have to create any kind of account. You don't have to screw around in TikTok. It allows you to externally query it. It'll bring up for you, so that first line just means only search within the platform of TikTok. So you don't have to go in and do it. You can do it externally. And then what it's going to do is going to pull everything that's got rigatoni and festa either as a hashtag or somewhere in the comments, like the captions of the actual thing. Not that other people created, but that the user itself put as a description to the thing. And so this allows you in kind of a way that's very native, because we're always doing Google searches. This seems sort of like, you don't have to navigate any of the bureaucracy of TikTok. You can actually search it from Google. So that's like a pretty good hack. The thing is that it's going to constantly prompt you to sign into your TikTok account, and you can just suppress that, just closing the window. But other than that, I'd say, you know, dig around a little and see what kind of thing you're looking for. If it's a very particular cultural event, celebrations, worship, music, literature, art, these all have really rich representations on TikTok. So you're not gonna have to look very far, but you do have to sort of scratch the surface.
So you mentioned the algorithms that you all used, and that part was super interesting to me. It also made me feel very old because I didn't realize you could do that. But anyway, it just also makes you think like, oh my gosh, I'm being manipulated all the time.
You're totally being manipulated.
Yeah, so
not like 20 years.
but so there's a question from Stephanie that's kind of related to this, and she asked, have you considered also publishing a non-academic human interest story about your experiences developing and acting your different persona? It's pretty amazing.
So like a fluff piece about method acting, but through profile presentation. Yeah, that would be cool.
Maybe, or something like that would be published by the U. Like sometimes they do those stories that feature different faculty or whatever.
We didn't do much method acting. I mean, I think so. Chimène and I sat together and we were like, what kind of intersectionalities do we want to target? And I remember that was a very laughterful series of meetings. Because at the same time, we didn't want to fall into stereotypes, but we were like, well, we need somebody who's about this age and we kind of know what that is, but then we don't want that to intersect at all with what this person is. And so a lot of it was like definitional, like we would create one and then say, well, let's do this. But then we'd be like, well, we need to move this one a little more over this way. So then it was a lot of repositioning to try to make things maximally different. But yeah, that's cool. Actually, we hadn't thought about that. I don't know. What do you think, Chimène?
I think we could like also develop a little bit the profiles and like narrow them a little bit. I looked at articles about how the TikTok algorithm works, and from there I was like, okay, then I need to create people that will interact with certain kind of content, because as Amanda said, we have pretty similar For You page, her and I, so at some point we will go in circle, but it's a very great idea.
I think that's cool. We'll have to hit you up, Stephanie, for ideas on where we might publish that, but I think that would be fun. I wonder if we should frame it as like, like embracing intersectionality and espousing different personalities for the sake of like doing what we do in a different way, right? Like, how do we get other kinds of experiences when we're just whoever we are, right?
So there's a related question in here. I'm sort of reading between the lines, but Lindsay asked about have you considered language students participating in the expansion of the database? And then relatedly, could they be ones to develop these identities, like their sort of language learner identity, and create a TikTok profile to search for TikToks based upon this identity that they create for themselves? Like, have you talked at all about getting students more involved, and what are your thoughts about the suggestion that they could take on this identity to help with the research?
So there are plenty of possibilities about that to do with students. So showing them like an example of a video, like a vlog or get ready with me, and ask them to reproduce something in the same genre. So they don't have to necessarily post it on the platform, but they can reproduce it and add some specific part of their identity, or like talk about specific experiences that are really related to their own identities. So that's, or look for resources that represent who they are, and to find people that also talk about the same things as them on the platform.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't talked about it in any kind of concrete way. Chimène is right. I mean, that's one way we would do it. This is, I think, part of the larger sort of urge to react that we've put out there. We're targeting instructors because we imagine that they would be the ones that would interact with some database like this. But you're right. The student participation is really like the full circle of this open educational practice. I don't teach language, and Chimène does teach French, but that's something that we'll have to sort of encourage our peers to do. And so in the context of an assignment, in the context of, you know, whatever, some kind of creative activity, you might encourage your students to participate in this to sort of feed the machine so that we can continue to make this more and more representative of different kinds of people.
Yeah, students could even like create a profile that's their aspirational self in the target language, right? Like whatever their goals are for learning the language, and then they could bring that into the way that they're setting up the algorithm. I don't know. There's lots of possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, Instagram is basically that anyway, but yeah, on TikTok, it's sort of more real, but you're right, that would be cool. They would have to be exposed though, I think, to know that they might exist already, you know?
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah. So there's a related question from Mandy about, and you had mentioned this when you were talking about it, how you might get methods students involved. So graduate students who are novice teachers taking a methods course. Do you have any ideas about how you might incorporate something like this into the methods course?
I've actually started thinking about engagement and motivation when I was taking the methods class, to continue make students more engaged, especially when you're a graduate instructor. But asking, for example, graduate students from the methods class to create a lesson, when to find a TikTok and make a lesson that is appropriate to their students' level, and focus either on interpretive task or creation expansion task will be interesting. So they are able to design their own, and that could be a good opportunity for French to contribute it to the database, but also for other languages to create course materials that are open to other instructors.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I agree with what Chimène said. I don't teach methods. I've never taught methods, but if I did, one of the things that I would really focus on is making students understand the importance of these open educational resources. You're gonna get tired of me saying this, I know. But I think there's some power that comes with that. So it gives you basically the chance to represent in the way that you think is authentic, or the way that is represented by the world itself, whatever it is you're teaching about. A problem I always had teaching French was that the textbooks never reflected anything that was realistic or that was authentic in terms of present day experiences in French speaking places other than Paris and Lyon. And so I always had a really hard time with that, because I thought it felt like we were teaching in very sort of targeted ways. But yeah, I think it would be, part of it is just like giving the students, like Chimène said, the chance to do some kind of targeted activity development that would either be around a theme or that would be around a particular skill, like raising awareness of a certain cultural practice, or getting students to do some kind of transformative activity in a certain way. Like you could theme it or structure it however you wanted. But the larger part would be, this is how you get students to participate in this thing that you are trying to participate in as an instructor yourself. So kind of like extending the cycle to your students, to showing them that they also have control and power over their own learning process in the language. One of the things that I think is really empowering about social media in general, not just TikTok, is that as instructors, we finally don't have to worry about representing all the things. We don't have to be all the things to all the people. We can anyway. But it gives us a sort of a space to tell students, this language we're teaching you, or we're trying to sort of expose you to, is really useful. And I might not be your targeted interlocutor. In fact, I'm probably not. But you can use this language with a whole bunch of people that you identify with. And here's a way to find them. There's a community right on the other side of this list of hashtags. It sounds goofy, but that's basically what it is.
So, Chimène, you mentioned using, these TikToks in the methods class to develop interpretive activities, like basically where you're focusing on listening, or video, like visualizing things. But there's a question in the chat about other skills development. So how do you envision that this, I'm paraphrasing the question a little bit, but how do you envision that this database might help improve students' interpersonal speaking activities or their presentational writing abilities? Have you thought about that at all?
I thought about that because I used it in my class, I don't know, 2 weeks ago. And so I designed a lesson around the TikTok. So we start from watching the TikTok and responding, so having a little bit more interpretive task when they have to respond to true or false, or like fill the blank or anything. And then asking them, so there's also interpersonal possibility where they have to, it was a vlog of a student in history in Paris. And so they're first watching the video, focusing on the information of the video, so the content, and then the hours at which she's doing which activity. And then I asked them to talk together and see if their routine as student is similar, is different. So they were talking to each other about this, and then they can have a writing activity where they actually describe their routine with the time. So there is a lot of possibility and a lot of activities. It really depends on the instructor and the learning objectives that we're looking for, but they can do something, have a TikTok that is very that has very informal language and recreate it with formal language, or try to rewrite a TikTok that was like in the present tense, put it in the passé composé in other tense. So there is a ton of possibility orally when you're writing, when you're interpreting, or like creating a lot of stuff. So
an activity that I did like this, that Chimène was talking about, translating register. Back when I taught French, it was a medias class. And so we would read a lot, or we would watch a lot of news clips. And so it was basically news clips, but on TikTok, so they were shorter. And so one of the assignments that everyone really loved was taking like a news clip on something like fairly serious, like recycling protocol or natural swimming pools, or like whatever, something technical, and then having them style shift and be like, okay, now imagine that you're delivering this piece of news to your grandmother. How are you going to translate this? Like, talk to your Francophone grandma. And then it was like, talk to your bestie. How would you translate this to your friend who's like your peer, who's the same age as you, who has like the same kinds of interests? Okay, how would you translate this to your parents? And so we kind of played, everybody took a different demographic, and it was hilarious. We took this very standard, very kind of dry report about chlorine levels and whatever else, and it ended up being a hoot. And you can't really predict, you can predict, but you can't always predict the kinds of changes they're going to make. Obviously, they're going to choose different kinds of words and different phrasings, but it was amazing to me how students, they were third-year students of French, had this like innate ability to know that you would phrase things differently. They used different intonations. They used different gestures with their bodies when they were like delivering these things, acting these things out. And these are all things that TikTok shows you, but that you never talk about. You almost never talk about gesture in a language classroom. And it was so cool to see that they had developed this sensitivity. And nobody ever said anything to them about it. And so we really deconstructed that for a long time. But yeah, the focus isn't writing, but you can definitely put it in that context if that's a faculty you want to use it to develop.
Yeah, I really appreciate both of your answers for two reasons. One is because Chimène took the methods class with me, and I love listening to you talk about teaching in this really coherent and creative way. It just makes me feel really happy. But also, I think often when we are working with text, I mean, I think we can consider TikTok a form of a target language text. We're really just focusing on the information we often just focus on the information that students are receiving. So some kind of interpretive communication, when in reality, these kinds of texts provide a springboard for developing all kinds of language competence, linguistic competence, proficiency, and so on. So I love the answer. Okay, there's a lot of very positive feedback in the chat and some anecdotal stuff, but there is one more question, and it's about signed languages. And Amanda, this is a softball for you because I know you're studying ASL. So, but what's your experience, or have you been thinking at all about how signed languages might be represented in a project like this?
Yes, so much for two reasons. So I'm in my second semester of ASL here at the U, and we do obviously a lot of video-based activities. And I was a TikToker and a social media freak well before I ever studied sign language. So it was really neat for me to sort of see that had a huge representation. And what I really love seeing is how different groups sign. So I'm focused on ASL in this class. But with this OER that we're writing, it's about learning French. And so we've been looking at differences between sign language in France and then sign language in Quebec. And so we have recently, we have a case study that we're doing in the textbook it's an American student. I think he's originally from Morocco, but he grew up in the US. So he speaks French and he speaks Arabic. And he himself uses sign with one of his family members. And now he's at Gallaudet learning ASL, but the sign that he uses is like a French-inspired sign that also has influence from Arabic, which is really cool. And so I've been sort of digging around to sort of see different representations of this, looking at things like the signer's space, like how much people take up space when they're signing, the space in which you might sign and how that's different. And then, of course, there's obviously lots of different signs for different things across the world. But that's something that, at least in any experience I've ever had teaching French, although we target all the functions, we target all the 4 skills, I didn't get any exposure to French-based sign languages as an instructor or as a learner of French. And so that's something that I'm really excited to represent for students in this particular OER that we're working on. But as a learner, it's been really helpful because I get this kind of content all the time, and it's really helped me with my ability to parse finger spelling, which is very fast, and you get hands at an angle that you can't always see what's happening. And so just seeing the different ways in which people present themselves as signers in this video space that is sort of more generally TikTok has been really informative on my acquisition of the language.
Okay. Well, perfect. That was perfect timing, Amanda, because it is now 1 o'clock. So we have reached the end of the hour. I want to thank Amanda and Chimène for this great presentation and the lively discussion following it, and to all of you for attending and asking such great questions and sharing anecdotes in the chat. We'll save a version of this for you too, so that you can have a look at the feedback that you got. Thank you all for coming. We hope to see you at a CARLA presentation soon. Have a great day.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye.